All right, let's get right into it. Not that long ago, it really felt like the future of databases was a done deal. One tech was the past, the other was the future. Simple as that. But then, something pretty strange happened on the way to the funeral. SQL didn't die. Well, it got a whole lot smarter. And this was the dominant narrative, right? If you were a developer back in 2010, you heard this constantly. Relational databases, the things that literally built the web for decades, were suddenly being called too slow, too rigid. Basically a fossil from the 70s. The future, we were all told, was NoSQL. End of story. So you fast forward to today, and SQL is stronger than it's ever been. So what gives? Did the big NoSQL revolution just fizzle out? Was it all a bunch of hype? Well, that is the central mystery we're going to unpack. And trust me, the answer is way more interesting than a simple yes or no.
To really get what happened, we have to go back to the beginning of the so-called war, to the exact moment the rebels first showed up on the scene.
So for 30 years, SQL databases were king. They ruled the world. But then Web 2.0 happened, and everything changed. All of a sudden, you've got companies like Facebook and Amazon dealing with this absolute tsunami of user data. Likes, shares, clicks, you name it. They just couldn't wait around for a traditional superstructured database to carefully process every little thing. They needed raw, blistering speed. And that exact moment of need, that was when NoSQL was born.
This really gets to the heart of the initial divide, doesn't it? These weren't just two technologies. They were two completely different philosophies. SQL was all about structure and guarantees. It had that rigid schema, which is kind of like a strict blueprint, Your data had to fit into this predefined model, no exceptions. And it was ACID compliant, which is just a fancy way of saying your transactions were rock solid, totally reliable. Think bank transfers. You need that guarantee. NoSQL? It basically threw all of that out the window in the name of speed. It was flexible, it was fast, and it cared more about being available than being perfectly consistent every single millisecond.
And for a while, this was incredible. It was like the Wild West of data, and developers were building things faster than anyone thought possible. But all that freedom, it came with a price. And well, the party couldn't last forever.
And yeah, this quote just nails it. That amazing flexibility started to look a whole lot more like pure chaos. Without a schema to enforce the rules, data got inconsistent, it got messy, and it got really hard to manage. And you know what? Developers started to really miss those old certainties, like knowing for sure that your data was actually, there. We missed our ACID compliance. So right when NoSQL was having this kind of identity crisis, the old guard, the big SQL giants, they decided it was time for a comeback. And they didn't just play defense, they went on the attack.
And how did they do it? Well, they started stealing the enemy's playbook. Big players like PostgreSQL and MySQL added support for JSON, which let you store flexible document-style data right inside your good old relational database. All of a sudden, you could have your structured, reliable cake and your flexible, schemaless ice cream all on the same plate. They got faster, they scaled better, and they became a whole lot less rigid.
Okay, but this right here, this is the crucial turning point in the entire story. Just as SQL was getting more and more like NoSQL, something pretty incredible happened. The rebel started to look a lot more like the champion it was trying to overthrow.
And you could see this happening everywhere. MongoDB, the poster child for NoSQL flexibility, added multi-document ACID transactions, the very feature that was the hallmark of the old world it rebelled against. And Cassandra created something called SQL, a query language that looks suspiciously like, you guessed it, SQL. The rebels were growing.
So this wasn't a battle to the death, after all. It was a convergence. Both sides started to realize they needed features from the other camp. The two worlds didn't destroy each other. They just crashed into each other and created something entirely new in the process.
And that brings us to where we are today. An era where the war is over and a new philosophy has taken root. It's no longer about picking a side. It's about building an alliance.
The fancy term for this new world is Polyglot Persistence. It sounds complicated, right? But the idea is actually super simple. Just use the right tool for the right job. You don't have to pick one database to rule them all anymore. Instead, you build your app using a mix of technologies, playing to each one's unique strengths.
So, did NoSQL die? Absolutely not. But it did lose the war for total domination. You could say the rematch ended in a draw, and honestly, that's the best possible outcome. Why? Because now developers like us have a richer, more powerful, and way more nuanced toolkit than we have ever had before.
This chart breaks it down perfectly. I love this simple way of thinking about it. You use SQL for the money, and you use NoSQL for the likes. For anything that demands absolute, unshakable consistency, like a financial transaction, you want the guarantees that come with a traditional SQL database. But for something that needs to handle massive scale and mind-boggling speed, like a social media feed with millions of likes pouring in, a NoSQL database is the perfect fit. The real skill today is knowing which one to pick and when.
So, the great database war is over. Both sides have learned from each other, and it's led to this new era of hybrid databases that really do try to give us the best of both worlds. And that leaves us with one final, really fascinating question. As these two philosophies keep getting closer and closer, are we eventually going to see someone build a true everything database? A single technology that finally does it all? Only time will tell.